I'm Olivia, 38, and I need to get this weight off my chest. You know those family dynamics where one child can do no wrong while the other might as well be invisible? Welcome to the story of my life. Everything was relatively normal until I was 8 years old. I was an only child, and while my parents weren't particularly affectionate, they were present. Mom would help with schoolwork, and Dad occasionally took me fishing at Lake Michigan. We weren't exactly the perfect family from television, but we were okay. Then came the night that changed everything. I remember my Aunt Diane appearing at our door at 2 a.m., telling me to pack a bag because Mom was in the hospital. My sister Megan was coming, but something was wrong. She wasn't supposed to arrive for another 2 months. Before we continue with today's story, if you're enjoying what you've heard so far, please hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps me keep sharing these inspiring tales that touch your day. Thank you for your support. The following weeks were a blur of hospital visits and hushed conversations. Megan was tiny, resembling one of my dolls but covered in tubes and wires. I wasn't allowed to touch her or get too close. That was when I first sensed it. An invisible barrier forming between me and the rest of my family. When they finally brought Megan home, our house transformed into a sterile bubble. Mom became obsessed with germs, industrial-strength disinfectants everywhere, hand sanitizer stations in every room, and constant cleaning. The harsh smell of bleach still triggers anxiety for me to this day. But here's what really damaged me. Whenever I showed even the slightest sign of illness, I was immediately sent to either Grandma Eleanor's or Aunt Diane's house. Every single time. One sneeze. Pack your bags. A slight cough? Off to Grandma's you go. First it seemed fun. Grandma Eleanor made the best snickerdoodles, and Aunt Diane had an amazing collection of mystery novels I was working through. But children aren't stupid. Eventually, you understand what's happening. You're not being sent on adventures. You're being handled like a threat, as if your very existence could harm your precious sister. I tried everything to earn their attention in healthier ways. Got straight A's? Mom would barely look up from Megan's latest doctor appointment calendar. Won first place in the science fair with a project on sustainable energy. Dad just asked if I could store the display board in the garage, since Megan is allergic to cardboard dust. Is that even a real thing? The real heartbreaker came when I was 12. 4 months, I taught myself to play bridge over troubled water on the piano for the school talent show. Megan had a 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit fever that night. Guess who had an empty audience? Meanwhile, 2 weeks later, the entire family, including both sets of grandparents, attended Megan's 15-minute recorder recital where she butchered hot cross buns. Megan quickly learned to work the system. By age 7, she had outgrown any serious health issues, but that didn't stop her performances. Headache. Must stay home from school. Feeling tired? Someone else guess who should do her chores. Worried about a test? Mom would literally call the school to get the deadline extended. I began spending more time in my bedroom, immersing myself in books about art history and antiques. My room became my sanctuary, mainly because Megan claimed she was allergic to my vanilla air freshener, making it the one place she wouldn't enter. You know what's ironic? When she pretended to be sick, part of me felt grateful. At least I'd be taken to Grandma Eleanor, where someone would actually ask about my day or show interest in my life. Grandma was the one who sparked my fascination with vintage jewelry. She had an incredible collection of costume pieces that she let me organize and catalog. I should have seen it as prophetic. The worst part wasn't even the blatant favoritism. It was how they rewrote history to justify their actions. Megan just needs more attention because she had such a difficult start. Olivia's always been so independent. Olivia understands that her sister has special needs. No, I didn't understand. I was a child who couldn't comprehend why having a strong immune system made me less deserving of love. Looking back, I can see how those years shaped me. The constant message that I was somehow unsafe or inconvenient doesn't simply disappear. But at least it taught me self-reliance. When no one checks your homework or celebrates your achievements, you quickly learn to be your own cheerleader. Most people either loved or hated high school. Me? I saw it as my ticket out. While Megan was establishing her drama empire in middle school, I was laying the groundwork for my escape. Nothing motivates achievement quite like knowing no one else will do it for you. Remember how I mentioned spending hours organizing Grandma Eleanor's jewelry collection? That taught me a valuable lesson about systematic organization and attention to detail. In high school, I approached everything with the same mindset. My desk at home looked like something from an organization magazine. Color-coded notes, meticulously planned study schedules, everything in its place. Megan teased me about it, calling me Rain Woman. Very mature, sis. But here's the thing about being invisible. No one monitors your failures or successes, so you can do whatever you want. I joined every club that wouldn't interfere with my part-time job at Wilson's Diner. Thank you to Barbara, the owner, for remembering my birthday when my own parents forgot. Debate team? Check. National Honor Society president? Check. Editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. The debate team was where I truly found my voice. There's something deeply satisfying about dismantling someone's argument while maintaining perfect composure. It also taught me how to negotiate, which I didn't realize then would prove invaluable later. I won states twice in debate twice. My parents couldn't attend either competition. Megan had important soccer games. She was on the C team and didn't even play. Junior year is when things got interesting. I took the SAT and received a perfect score. Not pretty good. Perfect. 1600. Do you know how many people achieve that? Less than 1%. I remember staring at the results screen for nearly 20 minutes, convinced it was a mistake. I rushed home to tell my parents. Mom was in the kitchen helping Megan with her English homework. The conversation went something like, "Me? Mom, look. I got a perfect SAT score." Mom: "That's nice, honey, but can you keep it down? Megan's trying to concentrate. She has a big test tomorrow." Megan: "Yeah, some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect." Mom: "Megan, sweetie, don't stress. You're just a different kind of learner." I still have that hard copy of my SAT results somewhere. Never made it to the refrigerator. But Megan's C+ in English? That baby got prime fridge real estate with a "We're so proud of you" magnet. The college application process was interesting. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone. I wrote all my essays, gathered recommendations, and handled financial aid paperwork myself. My guidance counselor, Mr. Patel, was the real MVP. My parents were too busy to help with the FAFSA, so I stayed late after school with Mr. Patel. Then acceptances started rolling in Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan, each with scholarship offers. I stored them all in a locked box under my bed, knowing what would happen if Megan found out. The day I received my full ride offer to Princeton, Megan made JV cheerleading. Guess which achievement warranted a family celebration dinner? Hint: I ate microwave mac and cheese in my room while they went to Olive Garden. But you know what? The scholarship was my golden ticket. Tuition, housing, board, all covered, plus a book allowance. I could finally leave that house where I was either invisible or inconvenient. The day my acceptance package arrived, I went to my favorite spot in the local library, a window seat overlooking the park on the 4th floor, and cried for an hour. Not sad tears. Tears of relief. When I told my parents at dinner that I was going to Princeton, they were horrified. Princeton? But that's so far. What if Megan needs you? Mom said, "I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Megan's cheerleading competitions are very expensive." Dad added, "Oh my God, can I have your room? I need space for my TikTok videos," was Megan's contribution. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Wilson's Diner to save money. Barbara, bless her heart, always gave me extra tips and made sure I took home leftover pie after my shifts. She also taught me a crucial life skill: how to recognize genuine people in a world full of fakes. "Baby," she'd tell me, "in diners and in life, the ones making the most noise usually have the least to say." On move-in day at Princeton, my parents couldn't attend because, surprise, Megan had a cheerleading competition. Aunt Diane drove me instead, helped me set up my dorm room, and gave me an envelope containing $500. "Your grandma Eleanor wanted you to have this," she told me. "She's so proud of you." Later, I learned that Grandma had been saving that money from her Social Security checks for months. That first night in my dorm room, I made myself a promise. I would create such an extraordinary life that being overlooked would be inconceivable. Not for revenge, not to prove anything to my family, but for that 8-year-old girl who used to get sent to Grandma's house for sneezing. College passed in a blur of all-nighters, instant ramen, and glorious independence. I graduated summa cum laude from Princeton, not that my parents noticed. They were too busy helping Megan transfer to her third college in 2 years. But this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. I landed an entry-level position at Blackwell & Stone Auction House in Philadelphia. I'll use a pseudonym for obvious reasons, but if you're in the business, you probably know who I'm talking about. A genuine high-end establishment with old money clients. I started in their estate sales division, which involved cataloging the belongings of wealthy individuals after their deaths. Not exactly glamorous, but it paid the bills. My first few months were standard, logging countless china sets, cataloging vintage furniture, and so on. Then came the Whitmore estate. Mrs. Whitmore was an elderly widow who died without children, leaving behind what everyone assumed was a massive collection of costume jewelry. Rooms full of the stuff. This is where those hours with Grandma Eleanor came in handy. I was sifting through a pile of jewelry when something caught my eye, an Art Deco brooch. Nothing particularly flashy, but something about it felt different. The weight was wrong for costume jewelry, and the clasp mechanism was too sophisticated for a replica. I spent my entire lunch break researching vintage jewelry marks and signatures. I ended up staying late at the office to use the company's subscription to several antique jewelry databases. The more I looked, the more convinced I became that this wasn't costume jewelry. It was the real deal. The problem was I was the new girl. Nobody would believe me if I claimed we had a potential treasure on our hands. So I did what the debate team taught me. I meticulously prepared my case. I spent 2 weeks during lunch breaks and evenings learning everything I could about Art Deco jewelry authentication. I even used some of my pitiful savings to pay for an online gemology course. Finally, I gathered the courage to approach my boss, Ms. Hammond. I brought my entire presentation, comparative images, historical documentation, and the works. The conversation went something like, Miss Hammond, I think we might have something significant in the Whitmore collection. Hammond, barely looking up from her phone, Olivia. We've already cataloged those as costume pieces. I know, but look at these makers' marks. They match perfectly with Van Cleef and Arpels' 1925 signatures. Hammond, finally paying attention. Where did you learn all this? I did some research. Long story short, the costume brooch sold for $47,000 at auction. It turned out to be part of a limited collection created for European aristocracy in the 1920s. Here's the real turning point. Hammond started trusting me after that. She began giving me other pieces to authenticate. Suddenly, my pointless hobby of sorting antique jewels had real significance. I dedicated myself to learning everything about vintage jewelry. I took every online course I could afford. I spent weekends at estate sales studying items. I even started a small notebook documenting various authentication procedures. My apartment looked like a jewelry scholar's fever dream. Walls covered with printouts of vintage hallmarks and certification guidelines. The auction house started seeing results. I was discovering important pieces that others had overlooked, developing contacts with collectors, and understanding the market. My commission checks grew larger. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was saving money. My family remained remarkably uninterested. At Sunday dinners, which I still attended like a fool, conversations went like, Mom, Olivia's still at that antique shop, right? Auction house. And yes, actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece. Megan interrupting. Oh my God, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall. But I didn't care anymore. For once in my life, I had found something completely my own. Something I excelled at, something unrelated to being Megan's sister, or the family disappointment. Then came the Rothman collection. This was about 2 years into my time at the auction house. A massive estate, old money family, lots of industry buzz. I was part of the team cataloging their jewelry collection, and that's when I spotted it. A seemingly ordinary Art Nouveau piece everyone else had overlooked. I spent 3 days investigating it, barely sleeping. It turned out to be from a famous Parisian jeweler's private collection, which was believed to have been lost during World War II. When it sold at auction for $238,000, Hammond called me into her office. I thought I was getting promoted. Instead, she said something that completely changed the trajectory of my life. Olivia, you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business. Initially, I brushed it off. Me start a business? With what money? But the idea took root. I began doing small freelance authentication projects on the side. Word spread that I had an exceptional eye. Private collectors started contacting me directly. One night, sitting in my modest apartment surrounded by jewelry manuals and authentication tools I'd gradually accumulated, I had an epiphany. This was something I could actually do. I could create something of my own. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I took out a loan against my car. I emptied my savings account. I rented a tiny office space in a less desirable part of town. People thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. I transformed a storage room above a Thai restaurant about the size of a college dorm room. The rent was cheap because it always smelled like pad thai, and the Wi-Fi only worked if you sat in the corner by the window. But it was mine. The first few months were interesting, and by interesting I mean terrifying. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. in cold sweats, calculating how many months until my savings ran out. Loan payments felt like a noose around my neck. My office furnishings consisted of a card table from Goodwill, and a chair I literally found on the curb, thoroughly sanitized, I promise. However, in the world of high-end jewelry, reputation and connections are everything, and my experience at the auction house provided me with both. I started small, doing authentication work for local antique dealers. My fees were lower than the larger firms, but my attention to detail was becoming known. Word spread. 6 months in, a breakthrough. A dealer I'd worked with at the auction house asked about authenticating a collection of Victorian-era brooches. The owner wanted verification before selling. It turned out to be an extensive collection with pieces spanning 3 generations of a family. I worked on it for 2 weeks straight, barely sleeping, documenting everything. I discovered 2 extremely rare pieces that had been misidentified as later reproductions. The owner was so delighted with my detailed analysis that she not only paid my fee, but also offered me a 10% commission when the pieces sold. That commission? $86,000. More money than I'd earned in the previous 2 years combined. Suddenly my phone was ringing constantly. Private collectors had heard about my knack for finding overlooked pieces. Estate lawyers sought my advice on inherited jewelry. Even my former auction house began sending me authentication work. I'm quite sure Hammond was secretly helping spread the word. Thanks, boss. By year 2, I'd hired my first employee, Amelia, a fresh gemology graduate who reminded me too much of myself at that age. Brilliant but overlooked because she was quiet. She's now my head of authentication and is worth her weight in gold. The firm grew faster than I could have anticipated. We moved to a proper office downtown, goodbye pad thai smell. Built a team of specialists. Earned a reputation for finding misidentified treasures. You wouldn't believe how many important historical jewelry pieces get mistaken for costume jewelry in people's attics. Success, though, came with its own challenges. The bigger we became, the harder it was to keep it secret from my family. They still thought I worked in an antique shop. Megan would make these condescending remarks during family dinners. Olivia, I have some old jewelry I was going to donate to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it. This from the girl who once set off the smoke alarm trying to make toast. Meanwhile, I had just authenticated a $1.2 million Faberge item that morning. Mom still introduced me to everyone as my other daughter. She works with old jewelry or something. While I had recently been quoted in Forbes, thankfully under my company name, and we had just opened our 3rd office. The strange thing? Keeping the secret became almost enjoyable, like a private joke with myself. I'd sit at Sunday dinner in my Target clearance outfit, actually Prada, listening to Megan talk about her entry-level marketing job, knowing I had just closed a deal worth more than her annual salary. I even started playing little games with myself, like wearing authentic Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings to see if anyone would notice. They never did. Megan once spent 20 minutes showing off her expensive $200 Michael Kors watch while I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe worth more than her car. The real challenge was managing growth. By year 5, we had established offices in Philadelphia, Boston, and New York. I spent more time on planes than in my own bed. We built a reputation for discretion. Turns out, many wealthy people want their jewels authenticated without the rest of the world knowing. The money was substantial. We needed to hire a large team of financial advisors. Still, I maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. I bought a nice but not flashy house in a good neighborhood. I drove a high-end but not obvious car. The only place I truly splurged? My home office, advanced authentication equipment, and the best security system money could buy. A custom-built vault that would make Fort Knox envious. The irony? They thought I was being frugal to help them. Mom would say things like, "It's so sweet of Olivia to help out. She must be eating nothing but ramen to manage it," while I had just authenticated a collection that earned me a commission larger than their mortgage. You know what's strange about success? The more you have, the harder it is to explain to people who have always seen you as inferior. It's like explaining color to someone who has only seen in black and white. They lack the necessary context. By this point, my company was doing extremely well. We had cornered the East Coast high-end jewelry authentication market, and our reputation was solid gold, pun intended. But every Sunday, I'd drive to my parents' house for dinner, playing Olivia the modest antique shop worker. The cognitive dissonance was becoming ridiculous. I'd spend my mornings on conference calls with Dubai collectors, my afternoons authenticating million-dollar pieces, and my evenings at my parents' house in carefully chosen normal clothes, eating Mom's overcooked meatloaf while Megan dominated the conversation with stories about her latest marketing triumph, usually something like bringing her boss coffee without spilling it. One Sunday stands out vividly in my memory. I had just completed a huge transaction, authenticating a missing Cartier piece that had been sitting in someone's safe deposit box for 40 years. The commission alone? 7 figures. I drove directly from the meeting to my parents' place, still euphoric from the successful authentication. Mom. "Olivia, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes are looking a bit worn." Me. "Oh, trying to save money," I said, wearing a $3,000 cashmere sweater that I'd purposely chosen for its understated appearance. Megan. "Well, if you'd gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry." Dad. "Megan, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I almost choked on my meatloaf, trying not to laugh. The monthly payments to my parents began around this time. Aunt Diane informed me that they were struggling to pay Megan's student loans and medical bills. Mom casually mentioned they might have to sell the house. I couldn't let that happen. Despite everything, it was still the home I grew up in. So I initiated an anonymous monthly transfer of $5,000 to their account. When asked, they assumed it was coming from an anonymous family benefactor. They imagined the rest came from Aunt Diane or another relative. Megan, of course, claimed credit for inspiring family members to help. The money helped, but it also had unexpected consequences. My parents began treating me with a strange combination of pity and patronizing pride, as if I were some noble poverty case sacrificing everything to support the family. Meanwhile, Megan's spending became more extravagant. She'd arrive for dinner with new designer bags, claiming they were outlet finds. They weren't. I can recognize an authentic Gucci at 20 paces. She began taking lavish vacations and bragging on Instagram about her fortunate life. I'm fairly certain she was using my support money for shopping sprees. Still, I kept quiet. The irony was simply too delicious. Then came the college fund drama. Megan announced she wanted to go back to school for her MBA. Another private university, of course, only the best for the golden child. Mom called me in tears, explaining how they couldn't afford it. Me. Maybe Megan could look at state schools? They have excellent programs too. Mom. Oh honey, you don't understand. Your sister needs to maintain certain standards. But speaking of helping, could we increase your monthly contribution for a few years? I raised it to $7,000 per month. My accounts barely noticed, but watching them praise Megan for taking initiative with her education, while assuming I was living on ramen to help out, that stung a little. The real kicker? I was giving a guest lecture at the same business school that Megan wanted to attend. My family didn't know that the dean had personally invited me to speak on luxury goods authentication and business growth. I had to invent an excuse for why I couldn't attend Sunday dinner that week. My own achievements began to feel like a separate life, as if I were some corporate superhero with a secret identity. By day, I was running a multi-million-dollar authentication business. By night, well, Sunday evenings, I was just Olivia, the disappointing daughter who worked at an antique shop. The weight of the lie was becoming heavier. Every time Megan made a snide remark about my career, every time Mom apologized to her friends for my modest lifestyle, Every time Dad suggested I get a real job. I think I always knew it would end dramatically. I just didn't expect it to implode so spectacularly on Thanksgiving. It began 2 weeks before the holiday. Mom called crying about her back pain. She'd been diagnosed with a herniated disc, and the thought of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 20 guests overwhelmed her. Now, I'd like to tell you that I offered to help purely out of goodwill, but honestly, I was tired of pretending her dry turkey was appetizing. Me. Why don't I handle the food this year? I can have it catered. Mom. Oh, honey, we can't afford a caterer. Me. Don't worry about the cost. I've been saving up. Mom, concerned, you're not taking out a loan, are you? I arranged everything with a high-end catering firm I use for business events. They do incredible work, the kind of food that makes you wonder why you ever bothered to cook for yourself. It costs more than my parents thought I earned in 2 months, but whatever. Thanksgiving morning dawned, and I was feeling pretty good. I had my laptop with me because I needed to monitor a major online auction in Geneva. A magnificent Art Nouveau necklace was up for sale, and I had a client interested in authentication if they won the bid. The food arrived on schedule, and everything was perfectly prepared. Megan, of course, had to comment. Store-bought stuffing? Really, Olivia? Mom's is so much better. This is from the girl who once set off the smoke alarm while making toast. Mom kept apologizing to everyone for not cooking herself, but you could tell they were enjoying the meal. Megan shut up after tasting the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per serving than her weekly grocery budget. I stepped away between dinner and dessert to check my laptop. The auction was getting interesting, and I needed to be prepared in case my client won. I set up in my old bedroom, which Mom had kept the same since high school. Meanwhile, Megan's room had undergone 3 renovations. That's when everything went wrong. I had left my authentication program running, with multiple tabs open showing various accounts and current contracts. Megan came in without knocking, some things never change, to borrow my phone charger. She saw my laptop screen and realized this was her chance to finally expose how pathetic her older sister was. Megan, smirking. Let's show everyone what Olivia's really been up to. Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and walked into the dining room. Picture this, 20 people, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and my parents, stuffed with gourmet turkey and half-drunk on expensive wine they mistook for Trader Joe's. Megan. Time to see what kind of important work Olivia's doing on Thanksgiving. She flipped the laptop around triumphantly, apparently intending to embarrass me with whatever minor antique transactions she assumed I was working on. The room went completely silent. You could hear the fancy clock I got Mom for Christmas ticking. She thought it was a reproduction. My screen displayed current account balance, $12.4 million. Pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million. Company's quarterly profit report, $4.2 million. Megan's face cycled through 5 different emotions in 3 seconds, the final one landing somewhere between shock and nausea. She actually swayed slightly on her feet. Megan whispers, "This can't be right." Mom. Megan, honey, what is it? Megan voice cracking, She's rich. Olivia's rich. If possible, the silence deepened even further. Then Mom started laughing, really laughing. Mom. Don't be silly. Olivia works at that little antique shop. I stood up carefully, straightening my basic cashmere sweater that cost more than their monthly mortgage. Me. Actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. Those antique shop comments? I authenticate pieces worth millions. That little business you never asked about has offices in 3 cities. Dad choked on his drink. Aunt Diane dropped her fork. Uncle Rob began coughing violently. Then Mom's laughing transformed into something else. Her face turned red, then purple. She stood up so quickly that her chair toppled over. Mom screams, "You have millions and you let us struggle?" Me struggle? I send you $7,000 every month, Mom. While sitting on millions. Your sister has student loans. So there it was. Not congratulations. Not wow, we're so proud of you. Just outraged that I hadn't given them more money. Megan began to cry, surprising, I know, sobbing about how she deserved to know, and how I had betrayed the family. Dad joined in. Dad. How could you be so selfish? We're your parents. We raised you. That was when I lost it. Years of being overlooked. Years of dismissal. Years of being treated as the family disappointment. Everything poured out. Me. Raised me? You shipped me off to grandma's every time I sneezed. You missed every achievement, every award, every milestone because Megan might feel left out. You never saved a penny for my college, but took out loans for her private school. And now you're mad that I built something for myself. The next 5 minutes were chaotic. Mom screamed about family obligations. Dad yelled about ungrateful children. Megan alternated between sobbing and demanding to know exactly how much money I had. Meanwhile, the fancy catering team attempted to serve dessert while looking exceedingly uncomfortable. I grabbed my laptop, took my Hermes bag, which Mom had previously complimented as a nice replica, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Mom discussing how to spend my money. Something about Megan's MBA and a new car. As I drove home in my sensible car, a limited edition BMW, my phone started filling with texts. The family group chat exploded. Megan began posting on Facebook about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. The days following Thanksgiving were like watching a tornado hit in slow motion. Except the tornado was my family, and the debris was my sanity. Let's start with text messages. Within 1 hour of leaving dinner, my phone had 47 missed calls and over 200 messages. Mom followed this fascinating progression. 7:42 p.m. How dare you walk out on family? 8:15 p.m. We need to talk about this like adults. 9:03 p.m. Your sister deserves a share of your success. 10:30 p.m. I've already called a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods. 11:45 p.m. Why aren't you answering? This is your mother. Meanwhile, Megan had become a full-fledged social media warrior. She wrote a massive rant on Facebook about how her millionaire sister had been hoarding wealth while watching her beloved family struggle. The comment section was insane. Distant cousins and former high school classmates I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly formed strong opinions about my moral character. But this part really got me. Megan actually posted, all those years of me trying to help Olivia's career, giving her advice about moving up from that little antique shop, and she was secretly wealthy. The betrayal hurts so much. I nearly threw my phone across the room. The only career advice she ever gave me? A suggestion that I try selling jewelry on Etsy. If you're familiar with the term flying monkeys, this is when they descended. Aunt Margaret, whom I saw maybe once every 3 years, called to inform me that family is everything. Uncle Greg, who I'm pretty sure still thinks I'm 12, emailed me a lengthy lecture on the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister, how did she get my number? Felt compelled to share her thoughts on family obligation. But the real fun began when they showed up at my workplace. I arrived on Monday morning to find Mom, Dad, and Megan sitting in our reception area. They'd told Amelia, my receptionist, that they had an appointment for authenticating services. Megan clutched her Michael Kors bag as if it were genuinely valuable. The conversation went about as well as you'd expect. Mom. We've discussed it as a family. Me. A family discussion without the family member you're discussing? Mom ignoring me. And we think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone. Megan. I need at least $2 million to start my new life properly. Dad. And your mother and I would like to retire. We're thinking a beach house in Florida. Me. Did you miss the part where I've been sending you $7,000 monthly? Megan. That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us. Me. I owe you for what exactly? The years of being ignored? The missed graduations? The constant comparisons? Mom. Don't be dramatic, Olivia. We gave you everything. Me. No, I gave myself everything. Right there in my own office lobby, I took out my phone and canceled the monthly transfers to their account. Mom gasped as if I'd slapped her. Megan began her fake crying routine but quickly stopped when she saw it wasn't working. Then things got ugly. They refused to leave. I had to call security. Watching my 60-year-old mother being escorted out while screaming about ungrateful children was surreal. Amelia asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, but I did have their names placed on the building's do not admit list. The harassment continued for weeks. New phone numbers. Fake email accounts. They even tried to contact me through my company's customer service. I finally had to issue a formal legal notice threatening harassment charges. Mom then played her final card. She called Grandma Eleanor.